Hi there. This week, your readings talk about assessment, and they do a pretty good job of, especially Riddell, of talking about informal assessment and some formal assessment. And Rice talks pretty well about the different kinds of ways you could assess English language learners in very, very specific practical ways. Yet, more and more the conversation in the field is talking about how you use standards for lesson planning and assessment. So I've included this PowerPoint to help you round out your information about assessment and lesson planning, including standards. Now, this short presentation is just an overview of the PowerPoint. You can then go into the PowerPoint to look at it at more length and in more detail. Basically, what I want you to get out of this PowerPoint is learning about two sets of standards, how to use those standards to then create your lesson objectives with content and language objectives, and then how to create a differentiated assessment plan and see how it all fits into one lesson plan. There are two types of standards, so that shows you that the standards show what needs to be learned, and then those are the content standards, and then language standards show how are you going to get there? How are your students going to learn the knowledge that they need in the curriculum? So this talks to you about different kinds of content standards. It used to be that each state developed its own set of standards, like the Virginia Standards of Learning, but then it became unmanageable across the United States because each state had its own set. So now more and more all of the individual states throughout the country are going into the Common Core. So you must be hearing a lot about it. You might have heard a lot about it this summer. And so I'm going to give you just an overview of that. But if you're working overseas, your school district might be working with something called AERO, American Education Reaches Out, which is through the State Department. So we'll talk about that as well. Here's information about the Common Core, and it's loaded with hyperlinks. I suggest that you look at the Colorín Colorado website. It gives you a very good overview of what the Common Core looks like for English language learners. This blog is also very good to keep following and keep getting informed about that. So basically, you've got this content being developed. The language arts content is also very detailed, and you can look at the way that it's been organized through the hyperlinks. And these hyperlinks give you more and more detailed information about each of these standards for the language arts. And then since it's broken down by grade clusters, there are also some transversal areas for language that are worked with at each grade level and at each language domain. And you can go to this link right here, and it'll show you what each grade level looks like for this information. And then, if you don't have enough information, each of these links show you much more specific information about the research, examples of texts and tasks, student writing samples, and then what each of the content areas looks like per grade cluster for the Common Core. Now, turning over to the international piece, AERO, if you're working internationally, has its own framework. And I believe it's also starting to get aligned with the Common Core state standards. There's a lot of work being done on it. I will be going to a conference in February on this and find out a lot more. And I will follow up with that. And if you'd like, tag me, and I'll be happy to give you more information once I go there. So go to these links to get more information on your content area if you're teaching abroad. Here is an example, for example, if you're teaching math, what all that looks like. And if you go into the detailed standard for your area, for example, math, and you're looking at data analysis, what does the standard look like? and what are the indicators. You would look at the indicator to help you figure out how to write your content objective. Okay? So there you have Arrow and Common Core. Those are the content sets of standards, the standards that look at content. Now let's look at the standards that look at English language development, okay? And those are more for, again, the English language learners, our students. So it shows you what they're for, why. You can read that at your in your time. What are the key considerations that are used for the English language development standards? And what are the different types of language standards? I've got 5 of them for you. California led the way pretty early on. WIDA has been, a lot of the work has been done with WIDA. You would be probably most familiar with WIDA. Arrow has its own set of standards for English language development, but under more of a foreign language lens. But I encourage you to look at that, because if you're working with English language learners overseas, there are slightly different considerations, along with the understanding that our English language learners are not immersed in an English language environment. So the expectations are different, okay? And the rationale that goes along with that is different. So I highly encourage you to read this hyperlink here. You're probably also familiar with ACTFL, and that's a very established council, and especially for foreign languages, it's also being aligned to the Common Core. And then some of you are also working with the CEF, the Common European Framework. And so here's a link to that as well. Here's just a breakdown of the California standards, if you're interested. And here is a breakdown for WIDA. As I said, many of you are pretty familiar with WIDA. I figured that in one slide, I would give you the basic framework of it and how to get to the grade clusters that you need. Okay, something that's really great in these booklets, you might already know, is if you're working with native Spanish speakers, their booklets also at the last couple of pages have their standards translated into Spanish, which is, I think, very, very useful. So how would you go about working with all of this information I'm giving you? These are my suggestions. Think about a grade level you teach, a content area. Identify your content standard, be it through the Common Core or Arrow. Write your content objective. Then look at the, let's say, for example, the WIDA Can Do, one of those booklets right here, okay? And see how you can write a language objective. And if you want, you can even stretch yourself and write for levels 1, 3, and 5, okay? Freeman, if you remember, talked about writing at the word, sentence, and paragraph level. That would be sort of the same thing here. And then write your language objective that would support the content standard or your content objective. Okay. If you've seen my prior PowerPoint on writing language objectives, I'm just reminding you about how to do that, the content and language objectives. Okay. And then, if you want to try your hand at it, here is a sample of how to go about it. Okay. So it shows you how to go through it, how to go into the Arrow standards, how to write your content objective, then looking at the WIDA for writing your language objective, how to differentiate between different levels. So you would pull the can-do descriptors, and then you would write them in terms of your lesson that you're planning. Now, you don't have to do every single one, because you'll never finish teaching your lesson, but you'll pick the most relevant ones from the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then combine those into something that looks like this. So for level 1, it would be combined the ones that are most relevant for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, and then you're working with the formative assessment. What are you going to be looking for throughout your lesson, okay, in terms of assessing your students at these levels, okay? And then you would write your lesson plan, however it is that you're writing it. I wrote it this way, just to be concise. And then the summative assessment at the end, after I've been monitoring my students' in formative assessment, at the end I'd like to have something to assess as a product. I could have my students working in groups, and this could be a group grade, or I could choose that the language part of the rubric is a group grade, and the content part of it is individual. So that's another way that you can work with it as well. So these are just suggestions about how you could differentiate your assessment, how you can write your content objectives and your language objectives based on different kinds of standards. So I hope that you find the PowerPoint useful for you, and it gives you a broader idea of what a lot of these terms people throw around mean and how they're situated into your context. Okay, so enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll see you on the discussion board.